Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy HubSpot Hump Day. Welcome to Let's Build Daily. I'm your host, Chris Carolin. Going to be speaking from the cuff today. I know you probably think this every day, Chris. But more so today, just some stuff to share on my mind. We'll see if I can share it while mapping successfully. But a couple things. I'm a big advocate of the, in regards to building consistency and quality versus quantity and, outcomes versus output. When you're trying to do something new that you haven't done before, I think showing up and shipping it, as I learned from Seth Godin, is I'd rather err on that side than not shipping it. And I always think of Lorne Michaels from Saturday Night Live quote, which I'm paraphrasing probably. They don't go live because they're ready. They go live because it's 11:30 on Saturday night, right? Obviously, they do a ton of prep and planning and rehearsals and all this stuff to get ready for that. But in a world, especially in the CRM admin space, where it's easy to not do stuff until you've got all the ducks in a row and until it's looking picture perfect, until you've read all the tutorials and you've done all the testing because you want it to be perfect for your stakeholders, and you've thought of every possible breakage or failure scenario, and they're gonna love it. That's not reality. So that's the mind state that I'm in today. Is this a bait and switch for mapping? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But when in doubt, map it out is coming from the similar place where, as I shared in the post, like it's easy to, when you're unclear on the way forward, or when you've got all these stakeholders that need to be involved and you're waiting on everybody else to get their projects done. I know internally, it felt like that was out of my control. So I would just move on to the next thing and start a new project. And this concept of accidental admin, right? We don't have anybody in charge of the CRM. So I guess I'm going to have to be, if I want it to work for my marketing activities or the growth things that I said would happen, or the website or whatever, right? But I'm not in charge of any of the people using the system, right? So I'm going to hand off the projects that they need to be in charge of. And, it's on them. So I can't move forward. So when you have so many of those irons in the fire, good morning, Salim. I see you. And I see that comment in my StreamYard area, but I see it as LinkedIn user, of course. Sorry for your struggles. A great point here from Salim. Unless you're the last gatekeeper, you need to map out how the content plan works and be able to explain the vision before they can approve shipping the first piece. And this is a great point, because with any of these projects, and it's almost always new, right? And this is why, like, over indexing on outcomes and the value and benefits of doing things without explaining what's actually happening you can get the buy-in for these cool, fun things like being the number one resource. But once you start doing stuff, or once you start needing them to do stuff, more importantly, if you have not created this clarity through mapping out a content plan for marketing or a CRM plan for RevOps, or what customer success looks like, when you need these other pieces in the organization to move forward, so you hand off the project, or you get verbal agreement, or you start up a Word doc that shares information. They don't know exactly what the next steps are, or worse, they don't agree with what the next steps are. You're in limbo, and it can seem like forever. So instead of dealing with that, I think accidental admin is definitely a coping phrase, to say the least. You look at your task list, right? They ask you to do something. This person that's in charge of a very important thing that you need to get done to move forward as an organization, like everybody agreed to last week. But now we got to update this property, or we got to make this new automation. So I can do that, and I can feel valuable in the moment doing that. But that's very, that dopamine hit of checking that off doesn't last very long, and it starts to fade. So that can lead to thoughts of, what are we even doing here? Is this providing value, long term? Is it providing value short term if people aren't even using this stuff? We create it for one customer for one use case, and nobody's adding data, to it. So what is it? What are we doing here? Am I a valuable piece of the organization? And, for me on the inside, it was kind of like, and this is where I wasn't, like, I can just move forward. If I decide to label something as out of my control, I move forward without worrying about it. So constantly asking the question of, is this person understanding the value? Is this person understanding the value? I told myself that wasn't up to me, right? So how could I, like, the whole concept of creating a space for it to be their idea, or waiting for people to get aligned, it didn't jive with me at all. It still doesn't, in large part, but that's a part of the human behavior that I'm trying to get better at understanding and managing. But when we agree on this overarching goal and then can't agree on the how, like, the overarching goal just doesn't matter, right? And then you feel like you're spinning your wheels. The RevOps boot camp that I had earlier this year was a huge revelation for me, as I've mentioned several times and will continue to mention. This whole road mapping process and current state mapping and future state mapping, that is something I was missing. In so much that you're still trying to communicate things. You're still not in charge of the projects. You're still handing off projects. But when it's just Word docs, or it's just verbal communicate, or it's just, verbal conversations, or it's just like the weekly management meeting where we're just going down a list of, Excel rows, to see who's in charge of what, and they give their progress updates. Nobody's going to move forward because you don't actually clarify, what's happening, when it needs to happen, who's involved, right? And what was the revelation is how visual, like, you can use a little bit of visual storytelling here to get people, you know, more engaged, create clarity about why engagement is important, and make it easier to understand what's next. So when I, maybe naively labeled the situation as out of my control and I didn't have any maps, um, beyond the super complex stuff that required, a sit down conversation. Uh, Salim, did you get your comments fixed? That's promising. And a great point, which I wanted to bring up, is that if the law, if business law, if business 101 is not requiring you to get these maps done, like in some industries, ISO 9001 and is basically the cost of doing business. And if you do not have that accreditation or others, then people will not do business with you. So it forces you to map out a lot of business processes. We still don't have things like that on the customer data side, to my knowledge. If anybody knows of something, I would love to, understand where to find that. Or if anybody's interested in another business venture, I think there's a ton of opportunity there. Not that I'm a huge fan of the ISO, um, the costs related and kind of the motions you have to move through, but it clearly has done a job of creating these foundational pieces, that may sit on the shelf, over time, but the act of getting them done uncovers so much, right? Because you got to get detailed when the whole goal, while it's very production and non-customer data focused, is we get a customer inquiry. How do we deliver what was promised so that the customer is satisfied, that it met their requirements, right? That's the whole purpose of a quality manual. So you got to get into the details. How do we get into those details on the customer behavior side, right? Here's what we usually have, and you've seen some of this before. And this is happening with most admins I see and talk to. And so, long story longer, when in doubt, map it out. If you are having trouble or just want to take a step back, but you're not sure how to do that and still feel like you're making progress or getting something done, or making good use of your time, I can almost guarantee for 99% of you, there is some mapping that you could be doing that, if you did it, would be valuable, would create value for yourself, for the company, for greasing up a relationship that might have a little too much friction internally or externally, right? Because usually what we find is we have some resources like this, maybe salute Isabel. Maybe we have, an ERD like this, right? Not a lot of storytelling happening here. Very, bare bones. This is how data moves. Maybe you had a custom one created. Hopefully you did, because this is not going to cover everything. So maybe you got, something like this. Generally, what I'm seeing now, this is not this is an example of something that's in my mind that I've created as a map that there's nothing else like it out there. So it's very hard for me to get help with it or maintain it. And I see a ton of this where it's like there's no standardized tools. I mean, even I'm using a new tool here, but you've got, maybe Lucid Chart, um, and Miro are becoming somewhat standardized, but I still hear about uh, Figma. I see Word docs all the time. Um, and so there's some internal interpretation of a map that you need to make, right? And the key is that, like, as you start to do this, like, internally, without standardized tools, without common language standardization, it becomes very hard to maintain, because you're the only person that can maintain it. And then when you have to communicate it to others, you're the only one that can explain it the first, second, or third times, right? So this is the grandiose plan that you never get to, but we have to find a way to get to it because it enables the things that I was just talking about as far as creating a common foundation to speak from. Um, Now, where to start from a best practices perspective, if we've got to start somewhere, during the boot camp, right? Uh, which was led by Jen Bergen and Connor Jeffers. Um, One of the resources provided was a link to this, Aptitude 8 awesome blueprints page where they've just got so many use case maps that if all you can do, like, so again, we're thinking about what can I do if I'm getting overwhelmed by the tasks or if I'm feeling like I'm not doing valuable things, right? How can I step back? Is there a go-to that I can spend time on that will move us forward, that will move myself forward, in all these different ways? And I think mapping can be, one of those keystones that you can kind of center yourself around, because it's probably very unlikely that mapping is 100% done, at any given time, even as you might work with partners to get this done. um Literally the day after implementation, you're making changes, very possibly as more and more people start to use the system. You change properties, you update things, right? uh Not meant to be maintained up to the minute. There are tools to help do that, but if you can think of this as like a go-to mechanism, um something you can come back to, as I've started doing this with more clients, and even non-clients, right? Just helping people understand how to think about this stuff. There's always a detail, like, unless you are talking about the process with everybody in the room at different times during the week, you're always going to find something new. There's always going to be, more details to maybe hone in on, right? Madeline says, even when everybody's maintaining their own maps, you have all these, separate maps. And that's where it becomes like no longer are we speaking from a common, language, uh, foundation, 10 language at once. That's perfect way to put it. So how could we that means when we're in person or via email or in Slack messages, we're spending time aligning understanding and language instead of spending time on productivity and moving projects forward, right? Or we don't spend time on making sure we're aligned, and projects either don't move forward or die or fail or all the bad things. And like, so connecting these dots to accidental admins and unintentional management of your, revenue technology stack with lack of digital transformation, lack of CRM adoption. Uh, I mean, it all connects for me, at least, right? And the revelation of the boot camp again was this can be a visual story that, you know, you can get to that can help set this foundation. And I'll say when you if you can approach it always from the customer perspective, right? Like we always have, this customer journey on top. It's a lot harder for people to um, you know, I don't want to say disagree necessarily. It's easier to get buy-in, to at least try to align on these things, right? If you come at it from, well, I need to know, you know, how many leads are converting because I need to, describe my value to the organization. So sales and customer success, I need you to put all this information in to help me as a marketer because I'm feeling less than, and I need my boss, who's asking for these metrics, right? That's I. It's not, it's not going to get you where you want to go. But what I believe can is, this customer experience mindset, right? So instead, we're talking about, hey, we want to know how leads are flowing through so that we can make sure if there's any gaps in the customer experience, and it can tell us which content we need to make so you can get better qualified leads, right? So we can have the handoffs that are better from sales to customer success, right? And I'm feeling like I'm kind of all over the place right now, but this is how, like, it's just insights that I've gained, like, since we've been, since we started this thing since in September of last year and after taking this course. So again, if you just need to take a step back, and this is a skill that is missing from the ecosystem. Like, honestly, I implemented HubSpot 4 times. Sometimes with partners, sometimes without, internally. I even went through and was a key stakeholder in building out an ISO 9001 process and quality manual. And I did the mapping in, Visio. I loved Visio, another mapping tool. And we had a consultant that would do the maps, and I, begged for Visio access. Can we spend $600 on this license, back in 2010, so that we can create this stuff, and keep it up to date. Oh man, how far we've come. But then I never thought to apply it to HubSpot. And, prior to HubSpot moving towards customer platform and towards custom objects and data structure, and, Dharmesh's post about this 11-12 year journey towards everything becoming objects, that education wasn't around really prior to 2021. And so I never had the skill. I saw it on the production side of things, but I was never applying it. Nobody was pointing it out for me that it was a missing piece, out of all the content I was ingesting. And, that's where I was super heavy on customer experience. They ask, you answer, content. I didn't have, schooling in data structure and stuff like that. If you find yourself in that spot, right? And literally what I did, as a part of the boot camp is like I just came to this blueprint library, picked one that I thought had some relevant stuff in it, and I recreated it, in my tool of choice, right? Just to start like building my skills so that now I can, approach this stuff from a better perspective, for myself, for our business, and, you know, creating common language, with our own clients, right? And so if that's where you got to start, that's okay. But what I'm trying to say is, I believe if you can start moving towards this, like move your mapping task up on the priority list, right? Find a way to make space for that. If you can make space for HubSpot maintenance and cleaning data, right? I think you can make space for this, right? Because this ultimately is going to make HubSpot work better for you and the organization, right? Without this, HubSpot makes it very easy to get things done and, feel like you're making a lot of progress. And that's by design. Like we want an easy to use system, like no other system around. You can do stuff like that without getting yourself into too much trouble, without breaking things. All the important stuff that could break things, they're going to put like two or three barriers in front of you. So it's very easy to add properties and add options and, start to play with things. But it can be also easy to get comfortable with that and not having a plan and strategy into how you're going to use the system. And that's why most people are using 10% or less of what they're paying for, right? When it comes to HubSpot and this powerful system. And if you want AI to work well for you, understanding how the system works is key. So, yeah, I think that's a good place to stop for the day. The main takeaway I think is like just know that you're not alone in this accidental admin journey. I do think that while it serves as a bit of comic relief and is a good coping phrase, I think we should try not to accept it as an accepted normal, right? We have to push our organizations to not be so accidental about it, to be more intentional. And I think getting the maps done and creating this visual story along with what's happening in HubSpot, right? All this stuff is working together, but finding a way to create the context needed, the common language foundation needed to have more productive conversations, to move people forward, to make sure you can get to a clear point of yes or no. I've given you this project, sales leader, success leader. You've said it's important. You said we need to do a good job on it. You've said we need to take our time with it. Is this what you mean? Like, is this what that looks like for you? Yes or no? If yes, cool. Like, what else needs to happen? If no, tell me what that looks like. What does this look like for you? And when can we actually get it done? Right? And what support do you need? Right? If we can give them that, now our expectations of being able to move forward with all of these digital transformation related projects, all these CRM related projects can actually happen so that we're not showing up every week and talking about the same stuff. Um, so, thanks for joining today, and I hope this, was helpful just to be able to share my thoughts. Felt good for me. Hopefully, it helped somebody out there. Um, and until next time, uh, look at your mapping activities, find the opportunity, and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.